Okay, so let's dive into one of India's most baffling cases. Seriously, this story has all the makings of a classic spy thriller. We're talking a secret airdrop, international operatives, and a massive arsenal of weapons. But here's the thing, unlike a movie, this real-life mystery, it has no clear ending, even decades later.
So, picture this. It's a cold winter night in a remote district of West Bengal. People are just settling in for the evening, totally clueless that the sky above them is about to deliver a mystery that's going to confound investigators for the next 30 years.
Right before midnight, the quiet is just shattered by the roar of a low-flying transport plane. Eyewitnesses said it sounded like a bomb going off. In the dark, deep in the jungle, most people just stayed inside, pretty unnerved. It wasn't until the sun came up that they discovered something truly unbelievable had fallen from the sky.
Parachutes were all tangled up in the trees, attached to these huge wooden crates, and many of them were stamped with a single, pretty chilling word, explosives. At first, the villagers were, terrified to touch them. But curiosity won out, and inside, they found a shocking arsenal of military-grade weapons.
And to give you a sense of the staggering scale of this thing, we're talking about 300 AK-47s, 25,000 rounds of ammo, rocket launchers, and even anti-tank grenades. I mean, let's be clear, this wasn't just some small cache of weapons. It was an entire armory, enough to equip a small militia.
Right. An arsenal like that doesn't just fall from the sky by accident. So that brings us to the first huge question. Who was on that plane and what exactly was their mission?
Well, the operation was apparently led by a Danish national named Kim Davy. His real name is Niels Hulk. He had help from Peter Bleach, a British arms dealer with a background in the elite Special Air Service, and a crew of 5 Latvians who were flying the Soviet-era transport plane.
So after the drop, the plane heads off to Thailand. But then, and you can't make this stuff up, it re-entered Indian airspace days later to refuel. That's when the Indian Air Force finally scrambled and forced it to land in Mumbai. The crew and Peter Bleach were arrested. But in what can only be described as a jaw-dropping security lapse, the alleged mastermind, Kim Davy, just casually walked out of the airport and vanished.
But this is where the official story starts to crack, and a much darker, much more complicated narrative begins to emerge, because the key players themselves started telling a very different tale.
You see, both Kim Davy and Peter Bleach would later claim they weren't just rogue agents acting alone. Oh no, they alleged they were just pawns in a much, much bigger game, an operation that went all the way to the highest levels of government and intelligence.
And this really lays out the two wildly contradictory explanations. So, the official story from the investigation is that the weapons were for a spiritual sect, the Ananda Marga, and they were going to use them to overthrow the local communist government. But the conspiracy theory? That Indian and British intelligence agencies orchestrated the entire thing to do the exact same thing, destabilize that very same government.
Now, India's Central Bureau of Investigation, the CBI, they were adamant. Their case pointed right at the Ananda Marga. They pointed out that the drop zone was just kilometers from the group's headquarters, and they claimed to have documents linking them to the whole plot.
But Peter Bleach tells a completely different story. He claims he was a double agent who told British intelligence, MI5, about the plot from the very beginning. He alleges they told him to go ahead with it because he thought it was an official sting operation. The goal, he says, was to create chaos, which would give the central government a pretext to dismiss the state government and impose direct federal control.
And what really fuels these conspiracy theories are some of these just astounding claims of bureaucratic failure. Bleach insists MI5 passed every single detail to India's intelligence agency. And yet, this critical, time-sensitive warning about a plane full of weapons was supposedly sent to the state government by registered post. It arrived, of course, long after the drop had already happened.
So let's fast forward to the decades-long aftermath. This whole thing morphs into this huge international diplomatic saga, and it's all centered around one man.
So while the Latvian crew and Peter Bleach were convicted and sentenced to life, they were all eventually pardoned and released after a ton of diplomatic pressure from Russia and the UK. But the mastermind, Kim Davy, who went back home to Denmark, he has successfully fought off India's extradition efforts for over 2 decades. Danish courts have just repeatedly rejected the requests, saying they're worried he could face inhumane treatment in an Indian prison.
So after nearly 30 years, what are we left with? Well, we have a convicted crew that's been freed, a mastermind who has never faced a trial, and two completely different stories about what really went down.
We're also left with something much more tangible, and it comes down to this number, 48. According to the official figures, that's how many AK-47 assault rifles from that Purulia drop were never, ever found. They are still out there, somewhere.
And it wasn't just the rifles. The real-world legacy of this whole mystery is a deadly arsenal that just vanished. I mean, look at these numbers. Dozens of assault rifles, pistols, and grenades are still totally unaccounted for.
Honestly, this case remains one of India's most enduring mysteries. Was it just a failed plot by some fringe group, or was it a shadowy intelligence operation that went sideways? It's a stark reminder that sometimes the most cinematic stories don't give you a final scene. They just leave you with a whole lot of questions.